Hello again to another Agricola Reaction. Today we will be watching a European army. How would it actually work? I think we really have to look into it. I don't mean myself, I mean the European Union. Looking at what's going on in our big... what's going on in America and in general in the world. So I think we can't really rely on America as a protective force, and we should kind of looking into actually making our own army as together for European Union, not just every country for itself. So let's just jump into it and see, because it's obviously it's not easy. We're talking about 27 countries that they would have to kind of involve in some way. So yeah, let's go.
Imagine this. 1.4 million EU soldiers, tens of thousands of tanks, thousands of planes, a unified European command, 27 national armies gone.
We really have to step up massive the defense expenditure.
A military budget on par with the US.
We need a clear, big plan from the European Union.
US, China and Russia? Who are they again?
For the member states, and of course for common European domains.
It's not going to happen overnight though.
A European army.
Urgently
possible.
have to rearm Europe.
Interesting thought. But is this possible?
I think it is possible.
No, not even close. You see,
not now.
The EU would have...
Not right now. But oh wait, there's the laws that they kind of prohibit European Union from having an army together. Okay, let's just watch them, because I think they would be possible, but
to transform into a federal state with full control over foreign policy and the armed forces. And frankly, many member states have
never really thought about that. I mean, they talk about banning all of the national armies, when I was thinking more about incorporating them together. So yeah, okay, let's just keep going, because
zero appetite for integrating that far. But that doesn't mean the EU can't do more together. In fact, there might be room for a European army that complements national armies without actually replacing them. Therefore, in this video, we're diving into how this would actually work, and whether this is even remotely possible. A lot of the analysis in this video is based on an article from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, so check them out if you are interested. Link in the description below. So how would a European army actually work? First and foremost, as mentioned before, this would be a hybrid force, not a replacement for national armies, but a complement to them. The backbone of Europe's defense would still rely on its major national militaries: France, Poland, Germany, and if it chooses, the United Kingdom. These national armies already exist and provide substantial...
I'm sorry. No, they're obviously... Are they talking about the biggest ones? Because I know, like, Ireland have army. I know Ireland's a small country, so have a smaller army, but... Okay.
Combat power. Next to the national armies, the EU can then establish a standing common force. One that doesn't belong to any single nation, but is collectively owned and operated by the European Union. This force could be around 100,000 soldiers strong, effectively replacing the 100,000 US troops currently stationed across the continent. And this idea isn't new. Back in 1998, Tony Blair and Jacques Chirac agreed to create a 60,000 strong rapid reaction force to handle European crises independently. The plan was ambitious, aiming to make Europe more self-reliant in defense matters.
What happened then?
But it never really took off.
Okay.
Why? First, the lack of political will, as many EU countries were reluctant to commit the necessary resources. Second, uncertainty about how this would work alongside NATO. There were fears of duplicating efforts and undermining the alliance, especially in Eastern Europe. And third, crucially, US opposition.
Of course there was
wasn't
opposition.
thrilled about the idea of Europe setting up a parallel military structure that might weaken NATO's and the US's influence.
You can get buy one.
Interesting. I kind of understand where America was coming with that, but obviously that was nearly 30 years ago. So we have to really rethink it, like what's going on with Ukraine, what's going on with America right now, and with Trump being in the power. And I don't know. To me, it's kind of messy what's going on there. But I always was thinking it was kind of weird that the European Union didn't have it, but army itself. But now, if he mentioned, making European armies of 100,000 strong to replace American soldiers stationed in, is really that many American soldiers? You know what? I shouldn't be surprised. There's like more than 10,000 American soldiers just stationed just in Poland, and multiply that by 20, add another 26 countries into it, and then Britain as well, and Ireland. Well, Ireland is European Union, so that doesn't really matter. But you know, if you think about it, yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised there would be more than 100,000 American soldiers stationed in Europe. So, yeah, I think it would be something that we should really reconsider and think about it strategically, us as a European Union, obviously.
Things have changed.
We're also here today to directly and unambiguously express that stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe.
It really is a bit ironic, considering the biggest opponent of a unified European defense for decades was the United States. But that's a topic for another video. The Center for Strategic Studies suggests that a 100,000 strong EU army should first focus on establishing a unified doctrine and training program. This doctrine could align with that of one of the more powerful member states, France, for example, ensuring that all troops operate seamlessly together. After all, European forces are already training completely green Ukrainian soldiers in combat tactics, so the blueprint is there. As for the officers, they could be recruited directly from existing European militaries, bringing in experience and leadership without reinventing the wheel. And when it comes to recruits, they could be drawn from across Europe, with the EU offering competitive salaries that might be especially appealing to people in poorer regions. This approach could also serve as an indirect investment into those countries. Interestingly, the research paper also argues that the EU can recruit from EU candidate countries, like the Western Balkans, in exchange for EU citizenship. As for language barriers, something long seen as a major obstacle, this might no longer be such a big deal. English will be the standard and a requirement. And let's face it, most Europeans are practically taught it at birth. The bigger challenge, though, is creating a European command structure that can oversee both the EU army and national militaries, capable of coordinating military efforts across the continent. Right now, the EU only has a very basic version of this command system, mainly managing peacekeeping missions. However, efforts to expand it have been blocked, mainly due to US concerns about undermining NATO's influence. This isn't very surprising, as NATO's supreme commander in Europe has always been a US officer. An EU command could easily be integrated into NATO, making it a European pillar within this alliance. In this setup, a European deputy NATO supreme commander could also serve as a top EU commander, ensuring that both EU
So now I'm thinking about it, like, you know, Trump is saying about pulling out America from NATO. If that's gonna happen, the European Union will seriously have to think about doing that. Because there will be no other option, isn't it?
NATO missions stay aligned. This setup would allow the EU to operate within NATO when there is consensus. But if the United States, Turkey, Canada, or any other NATO member objected to a military action in Europe, in the worst case, a conflict with Russia, the EU would still have the ability to act independently. A setup like this would actually make NATO stronger, as the US would have a partner that can act independently with a larger and stronger force. So now that we have the command structure, who decides where and when this force gets deployed? And to be honest, this is the biggest obstacle Europe faces in creating a defense force. In France, the president makes the final call on troop deployments, while in Germany, it's the parliament that must vote in favor. But at the EU level, neither of these options is possible. Ursula von der Leyen doesn't have the mandate to make foreign policy decisions for an EU army, and neither does the European Parliament. For that to happen, the EU would need to go through treaty reform. a process similar to changing a national constitution that could take years. The most realistic option would be to give this power to the European Council, the body that includes all the EU heads of state. This way, the decision to deploy the EU army would rest with our elected leaders, ensuring both legitimacy and accountability. Interestingly, this approach might not require EU treaty change. If the EU army is tasked solely with defending EU borders, it could be developed under the same legal framework that created the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, also known as Frontex. And then there's Article 42.7 of the EU Treaty, which couldn't be clearer. It says that member states should use all the means in their power to assist a member state that is a victim of armed aggression, and deploying the EU army would certainly seem consistent with using all the means in their power. Now, before we dive into whether a European army is even possible, have you checked out our Patreon? Our members of parliament get to vote on our video ideas directly on our Discord.
Why do you
and
have
the winning topic
Gal
actually gets made into a video right here on this channel. Plus, we're turning this into a weekly event, so you'll have a real say in the direction of the channel. It's also a huge help in keeping us independent and creating these videos. So please support us and find the link in the description below. And to all our existing patrons out there, thank you so much for your support. So, is an EU army actually possible? Well, it needs a lot of political will.
Yeah, so
but
we're
getting all
gonna need some
27 member
time.
states to agree on a common EU military force? No chance. Countries like Hungary and Slovakia would almost certainly use their veto. The only way forward would be through a coalition of the willing, a group of countries ready to move ahead without unanimous approval.
I kind of understand the Hungary is kind of like against, like recently mostly votes kind of like against kind of overall thing. But why is Slovakia would be go against?
And this concept really isn't that abstract. Not all EU countries are part of the EU Schengen area, or the Eurozone for that matter. And there's even 4 non-EU countries that are part of the Schengen area. A similar approach could work for the EU army. Willing countries could opt in, while others could opt out. For example, 23 countries might join, and possibly even the United Kingdom, a non-EU country, making it 24. Each participating country would then decide how they want to contribute. At a minimum, participating countries would provide funding and allow the EU to recruit soldiers from their populations. For example, if the new NATO target is set at 3.5% of GDP for military spending, then at least 1% could be allocated to the EU army, while the remaining 2.5% would go towards maintaining their national militaries. This arrangement would be particularly relevant for larger nations like the UK, France, Germany, and Poland, as these countries already have military capabilities and would likely want to preserve their national forces alongside a collective EU force. However, Europe's smaller countries could eventually merge parts of their national forces into this EU force on an optional basis. And for the countries that are fully committed to European defense, there could even be an option to allocate their entire national force to the EU army, and only keeping a small force at home to serve more like a national guard or reserve to react to crises and disorder rather than military conflict. At first glance, few countries may seem interested in level 3 integration. However, the reality is that many of these smaller national militaries do little to boost Europe's overall combat power and often just add coordination headaches. For many Europeans, heavily investing in their small national militaries seems impractical. This is why public opinion often supports shifting the defense burden to a European level, and this flexible approach could also let the EU army grow organically, with countries committing at different levels based on their capabilities and willingness. Here's what I think. What really irritates me about most discussions on strengthening Europe is that our leaders focus almost entirely on spending more money. While that's certainly important, it's not even the biggest problem we have. The real issues are structural. We simply have a very fractured defense landscape, a patchwork of 27 separate militaries that aren't designed to work together, defend Europe, or to protect the Ukrainian border. And sometimes I can't help but feel that the main reason the US pushes European countries to increase defense spending is to benefit its own military-industrial complex by having us buy American weapons.
True.
Is it even in America's interest for us to have a unified European army? They've blocked it in the past, and one could argue that the US doesn't actually want a strong Europe, capable of acting independently, without US involvement or decision making. So, should we spend more money on defense? Absolutely. But let's also focus on pooling our resources and working together so we can take advantage of economies of scale, standardization, and common procurement. And as Tusk put it last weekend, 500 million Europeans are asking 300 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians.
Exactly.
If we need to count on anyone, it should be ourselves. Because Europe really is a global power. And I couldn't agree more. Let us know what you think in the comments. And we also have a very cool video on whether Europe can defend itself without the US. Right here if you are interested. And please consider becoming a member of the European Parliament on our Patreon to vote on our video ideas. Your contribution makes this channel possible. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you to our very generous presidents, Jan, Sjouke, Christian, Peter, AGVD, BJ, and Unite Europe. You guys are simply awesome. See you in the next video.
That was really good and explained it to me a lot, because honestly I was kind of talking about this, the fact that why don't we have, like, why the European Union doesn't have its own army yet, and for some reason I'm not that surprised that America was opposed. Like, seriously, I'm not that surprised, but out of curiosity I am going to check, because he said 100,000. How many American soldiers stationed in Europe? Okay, so one of... Whoa. So Wikipedia says that United States military deployments have about 160,000 of active duty personnel stations outside America. Then there is something about Council of Foreign Relations saying as of 2024 the US had 7,000 troops in the South Sea and 4,500 troops in the Mediterranean Sea. Overall, there you go, BBC. Overall, the US has more than 100,000 military personnel deployed in Europe. Military personnel, that doesn't mean it's all... Wait, never mind, it's military. Last time he was president, Trump threatened to withdraw some of it, blah blah blah. Okay. Okay, so 100,000 it is. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so but there's number of US military personnel in Europe by 2024 by country as well. So let's see, Germany have the most. What is... Definitely not right. Number of active duty United States military personnel in Europe in 2024 by country. So Germany, it says 35,065. Italy 12,000, United Kingdom 10,000, Spain 3,000, Turkey, and it says Poland have 299. That just kind of doesn't really ring true, because even the American thing says that. Okay, alright, that doesn't really matter like that much. So basically what I think is that, yeah, the European Union should start thinking about building their own army. Will I join that army? No, because I'm too old for that. I was never thinking about joining an army. But if there was something happen, will I fight? Yes, I will. You know, like, seriously. I'm not going to go quietly. And I don't think I should go into that conversation here on YouTube. So anyway, so what do you think? If you're European and you're living in the European Union, do you think European Union should have their own army? Or should we rely on America? And if you're American, what do you think? Should European Union have their own army or should we rely on America? Same question. So Thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye!